Well, the successful demonstration took place during the Aviation Africa 2025 Summit in Kigali, the capital of Rwanda. Now, Rwanda now joins other countries that are also test-driving electric self-flying air taxis, including China, Germany, the Dominican Republic, Israel, and the United States.
They told Africa to wait, to watch, to follow, to consume technology only after the world's real innovators were done with it. But on a morning in Kigali, Rwanda ripped that script to shreds. A self-flying passenger drone lifted into the African sky, not in Dubai, not in Paris, but in the heart of Africa. This wasn't just a flight. It was a slap in the face to every narrative that painted Africa as late, dependent, and incapable. But how was this done? Let's find out. On September 3, 2025, the sky above Kigali was no longer just blue. It was rewritten. The sound wasn't the deafening roar of a jet engine, nor the buzzing whir of a helicopter. It was a quiet, electric hum, the kind of sound that announces a new chapter rather than echoing an old one. Rising from the ground was the EHang EH216-S, a self-flying passenger drone. No pilot at the controls, no cockpit cluttered with instruments. Just two seats, passengers strapped in, and an autonomous brain doing what only a handful of nations have dared to attempt. The drone ascended gracefully, climbing to 100 meters, hovering as if to say, "Remember this moment." For Africa, this wasn't simply a machine rising into the air. It was a continent rising with it. The spectators on the ground, officials and citizens alike, weren't just watching a test flight. They were watching history being carved in real time. Africa's first public passenger drone flight. The timing was deliberate. On the day of the Africa Aviation Summit 2025, Rwanda staged its reveal like a masterstroke. Delegates, journalists, and investors who had come expecting routine conference chatter instead found themselves staring into the future. It was a bold move, a declaration that Africa wouldn't play background music to global aviation. It would conduct the orchestra. For decades, stories about African skies have been dominated by tragedy or dependence. Airlines struggling, outdated fleets, Western companies supplying Africa with hand-me-down planes long past their prime. That narrative shattered the moment the EH216-S left the ground. No longer was Africa simply a buyer of second-hand aviation. It had become the stage for aviation's most daring experiment. What made the moment bitter for skeptics was its clarity. The excuses that Africa was not ready, too unstable, or too poor collapsed in an instant. Kigali wasn't just ready, it was ahead. Ahead of Western cities, it is still bogged down in paperwork. Ahead of European regulators still arguing about what's safe. Ahead of the American giant, paralyzed by its own fear of disruption. And while others debated, Rwanda acted. The symbolism ran deeper than technology. For ordinary Africans watching clips online or catching the story on their phones, it wasn't about drones or aviation jargon. It was about pride. It was about seeing their continent, so often caricatured as backward, now leading in a frontier most of the world hasn't touched. For once, Africa wasn't being pitied or lectured, it was being envied, and that envy burns. The reactions poured in fast. Aviation experts admitted it was unexpected. Western analysts downplayed it as symbolic. But symbols matter, especially in a world where perception shapes investment and confidence. Rwanda didn't just showcase a drone, it showcased a mindset that Africa doesn't need permission to innovate. The EH216-S flight was less about passengers in a cabin and more about a continent breaking through the psychological ceiling imposed on it. As the drone descended smoothly back to the tarmac, the applause wasn't just for Rwanda, it was for Africa's arrival. But beneath the cheers lingered a bigger question. How did this nation, smaller in land than some African provinces, pull off something so seismic? The answer is not luck or coincidence. It lies in a ruthless strategy. Rwanda has mastered the art of turning its smallness into shockwaves that ricochet across the globe. In international politics, size has often been equated with power. Large populations, vast territories, and overflowing treasuries have historically been the markers of influence. Rwanda refused to accept that formula. Instead, it rewrote the playbook. With only 13 million people and a land area smaller than many African provinces, Rwanda could never compete by scale. But what it lacked in size, it made up for with precision. It chose the tactic of first moves, acting faster than anyone else, even if the stage was bigger than itself. Look at the drone flight through that lens. While the West drowns in endless regulations, and while larger African nations wrestle with bloated bureaucracies, Rwanda moves with surgical speed. It positions itself as the continent's laboratory, small enough to test, bold enough to implement, and smart enough to scale. For Kigali, innovation is not an accessory. It is the very engine of its survival. This is not new. Rwanda has quietly been playing this game for years. It shocked the global health sector when it rolled out nationwide drone delivery for medical supplies long before wealthier countries dared to. When Silicon Valley was still debating ethics and European capitals were still buried in safety codes, Rwanda was already flying blood and vaccines across mountains in minutes. That decision wasn't just about saving lives, it was about sending a message. Africa does not need to wait. The same philosophy is at work in aviation. Rwanda doesn't have the financial clout of Nigeria or the infrastructure depth of South Africa, but it has something arguably more powerful: focus. It identifies the gaps the rest of the world is too slow or too arrogant to fill, then makes bold moves that ripple far beyond its borders. Every time Rwanda strikes first, it rebrands not only itself, but the entire continent. The genius of this strategy is that Rwanda knows perception is half the battle. When a small nation consistently delivers first, it forces the global media, investors, and policymakers to take notice. Rwanda's medical drone program turned it into a darling of innovation conferences. Its environmental policies turned it into a model for sustainable development. Now its passenger drone flight has catapulted it into the aviation conversation. Each of these moves is carefully chosen for maximum symbolic impact, and symbolism, in a world of headlines and investment flows, can be as valuable as raw power. But strategy is not only about seizing headlines, it's about control. Rwanda doesn't simply showcase futuristic technology, it integrates it into its national narrative. Each breakthrough is woven into its vision of self-reliance, modernization, and sovereignty. The country's leadership understands that in the 21st century, innovation is political. Being first isn't just about bragging rights, it's about negotiating from a position of strength when sitting across from global powers. Of course, critics dismiss Rwanda's approach as too ambitious, too flashy. But the drone flight silences them. This is not a nation chasing vanity projects. It is a nation using innovation as leverage, a nation proving that technology can replace territory as a source of influence. And that is why Rwanda's smallness is not a handicap. It is a weapon. It allows Kigali to move with agility, to take risks that larger, slower nations cannot afford to take. The world may still call Rwanda small, but every calculated move it makes expands its footprint. With each bold experiment, Kigali turns its limited geography into limitless possibilities. And with this drone flight, Rwanda has shown once again that the continent's so-called minnows can be the sharks rewriting the global order. But strategy alone doesn't put a passenger drone into the sky. Vision needs partners, and Rwanda has chosen its allies with just as much precision. So the question becomes, who stood beside Kigali in making this leap, and what does that alliance really mean for Africa? Let's pause for a second to say, big thank you to the Black Culture Diary community, where Black voices, stories, and legacies are preserved and amplified. By becoming a member, you're not just supporting the channel, you're becoming part of a powerful cultural movement. Let's continue. No nation, no matter how sharp its strategy, launches a passenger drone alone. Rwanda's historic flight wasn't built in isolation. It was engineered through an alliance that rewrites the balance of power in Africa's skies. Behind the EH216-S's graceful ascent stood two crucial partners: the China Road and Bridge Corporation, CRBC, and EHang, the global pioneer of autonomous air mobility. Together with Kigali's political will, they formed a triangle of vision, engineering, and technology that Western capitals did not see coming and now cannot ignore. CRBC's presence in Rwanda is more than construction contracts. For decades, this Chinese engineering giant has been building roads, ports, and bridges across Africa, But here, its role took a dramatic turn. CRBC brought not asphalt and concrete, but the foundation for an entirely new economy, an infrastructure of landing pads, charging networks, and the connective tissue that advanced air mobility demands. It is a reminder that engineering is not just about what lies on the ground, it is also about what will move in the air. Rwanda understood that, and CRBC became the enabler. Then there is EHang, a company often dismissed in the West as experimental, but already flying in China, the United Arab Emirates, and parts of the Middle East. The EH216-S is not a prototype collecting dust in hangars. It is a machine tested, refined, and ready to rewrite urban transport. By choosing Rwanda as the stage for Africa's first flight, EHang didn't just showcase technology, it chose sides. It signaled that Africa, not Europe or the United States, would be the next theater where autonomous aviation takes hold. What makes this alliance so potent is that it isn't charity. Rwanda is not a passive recipient of foreign toys. It is an active architect, shaping the regulatory framework, creating the legal environment, and deciding how these technologies integrate into its cities. Kigali is ensuring that Africa is not reduced to a showroom for foreign inventions, but becomes a co-owner of the future. That subtle but critical distinction is what sets this partnership apart from the usual aid-driven dynamics the West has long imposed. For CRBC, Rwanda is the gateway to demonstrate that Chinese engineering is not limited to bridges and roads. It can build the skeleton of a new aviation economy. For EHang, Rwanda is proof that its vision of autonomous mobility is not confined to Asian megacities. It can thrive in African capitals too. And for Rwanda, both partners are tools for leverage, an opportunity to anchor itself at the center of a technological axis that spans continents. Western analysts will try to dismiss this as another instance of China expanding influence in Africa, but that misses the point. The real story here is not about China expanding, it's about Africa choosing. Kigali didn't wait for Washington or Brussels to hand it outdated machines under the banner of partnership. It went where the ambition matched its own. In doing so, it has carved out an alliance that is as much about sovereignty as it is about technology. The symbolism could not be clearer. While the West debates whether Africa is ready for innovation, Africa is already building with those who treat it as capable. While Europe worries about regulation, Kigali writes its own. And while the United States obsesses over maintaining dominance, Rwanda simply moved forward, quietly, decisively, and with the right allies at its side. But this alliance raises a bigger question. Technology and engineering are one thing, but what is it all building toward? Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. When Rwanda's drone rose into the sky, it was more than a demonstration of engineering. It was an opening shot in a new economic war. The battlefield is called the low-altitude economy, and whoever dominates it will control far more than transport. They will control logistics, health delivery, agriculture, tourism, and even security. This is not just about flying machines. It is about rewriting the way societies function below 1,000 meters in the air. So what exactly is this low-altitude economy? It is the airspace between the rooftops and the skies, an invisible layer where passenger drones, cargo carriers, and surveillance aircraft can operate. Traditionally, aviation has been obsessed with high-altitude jets crossing continents. But the future lies closer to the ground, moving people across cities without traffic, delivering goods faster than trucks, monitoring crops with precision, responding to disasters instantly. It is here, in this overlooked space, that trillions of dollars will be made. For Africa, the implications are staggering. Consider Lagos, where commuters can lose up to 4 hours a day in traffic. A fleet of autonomous passenger drones could transform mobility, making minutes out of journeys that now take hours. Or take Nairobi's rural-urban divide. Medicines and medical staff often struggle to reach villages cut off by poor roads. Drone corridors could erase that gap, giving remote communities the same access to services as capital cities. Even agriculture, Africa's lifeline, could be revolutionized, with drones monitoring soil health, delivering fertilizers, and tracking locust swarms before they become plagues. Tourism, too, stands on the edge of reinvention. Imagine visitors to Rwanda soaring silently above volcanoes national park in electric aircraft, seeing mountain gorillas from the air without disturbing the environment. Or picture coastal nations offering aerial tours of coral reefs, rainforests, and historic sites. Africa's natural beauty, long commodified by outsiders, could finally be monetized by Africans themselves through African-controlled skies. But the low-altitude economy is not just an opportunity, it is sovereignty. Whoever controls this airspace will dictate who benefits from it. If Africa fails to secure ownership, foreign corporations will seize it just as they seized the mines, the oil wells, and the railroads a century ago. Africa's skies could become the new gold fields, harvested for profit by outsiders while Africans pay for access to their own air. That is why Rwanda's demonstration matters so deeply. It is not just about technology, but about planting a flag. Rwanda has shown that Africa doesn't need to wait for permission. By setting its own regulatory environment and conducting its own demonstrations, it has proven that African nations can write the rules of engagement. The continent cannot afford to repeat the mistakes of the digital age, where Silicon Valley monopolized platforms while Africa became the consumer base. This time, Africa must be a producer, regulator, and innovator all at once. The urgency is clear. China is already building drone highways across its cities. The UAE is branding itself as a hub for flying taxis. Europe debates endlessly but still tries to secure a first-mover advantage. If Africa hesitates, the skies will be claimed in contracts signed elsewhere. And once again, Africa will be forced to buy back its own future. But Kigali's flight changes that trajectory. It forces African leaders to ask, do we let others own our air, or do we claim it ourselves? Because make no mistake, this isn't just about convenience or prestige. It is about survival, wealth, and dignity. The skies below 1,000 meters are the new frontier of sovereignty, and Africa has the chance to claim them before anyone else. Still, a frontier is only valuable if it can be defended and expanded. And that brings us to the final burning question. What does Rwanda's leap mean for Africa's place in the global race for aviation supremacy? For more than a century, the story of aviation has been written without Africa at the table. The Wright brothers took off in America, Airbus rose in Europe, Boeing dominated in the United States, and China surged with a state-driven push. Africa? It was painted as the consumer, buying old fleets, leasing planes that others had already retired, forever stuck in the role of passenger rather than pilot. But Kigali's drone flight has smashed that narrative. It wasn't just about Rwanda. It was a continental announcement. Africa is not here to spectate. It is here to compete. Globally, only a handful of countries have dared to experiment with self-flying passenger drones. China has been the boldest, running trials across Guangzhou and Shenzhen. The United Arab Emirates positioned Dubai as a futuristic playground, where flying taxis are marketed as luxury transport. In Europe, regulators choke innovation with endless paperwork. And in the US, fear of liability has paralyzed deployment. Each of these regions claims to be shaping the future, yet it was Kigali, a city smaller than many Western suburbs, that hosted the first African flight. That matters because it upends the hierarchy. If Africa can pioneer drones, then it can pioneer in other high-tech fields too. The psychological shift is as important as the technological one. For decades, investors, policymakers, and even African citizens themselves were conditioned to believe the continent's role was to wait. Wait for technology, wait for approval, wait for permission. Rwanda's demonstration broke that conditioning. It proved that firsts can happen in Africa, that headlines can emerge from Kigali instead of Silicon Valley. Once that perception changes, capital begins to flow differently. Partnerships are struck on new terms, and Africa's negotiating power multiplies. The symbolism also carries geopolitical weight. In a world where technology is power, Rwanda aligned itself not with old colonial overseers, but with new partners who share its appetite for disruption. That alliance, forged with CRBC and EHang, positions Africa within a rising axis of innovation that stretches from Beijing to Dubai to Kigali. The West may dismiss this as symbolic, but symbolism has teeth. It shapes where the next factories are built, where research labs are located, and where young engineers dream of working. Kigali's skies have become proof that the frontier is no longer exclusively Western. This doesn't mean Africa's path will be easy. The West will fight to reassert dominance, throwing regulations, trade barriers, and narratives of safety to slow Africa's advance. Multinationals will attempt to capture African skies under the guise of partnership. But the precedent has already been set. Africa can act independently. The flight in Kigali was not an imitation of the West, it was a rejection of dependency. And that rejection reverberates far beyond aviation. The broader question now is, what does Africa do with this momentum? Rwanda's leap gives the continent leverage, but leverage is only valuable if used. If other African capitals follow Kigali's lead, Lagos testing drone corridors, Nairobi integrating them into public transport, and Addis Ababa building hubs for regional flights, then Africa could carve out not just participation, but dominance in the global low-altitude economy. The continent has the chance to become not merely a consumer of future aviation, but a rule-maker, setting standards, writing codes, and exporting models the rest of the world must follow. As the EH216-S descended back onto Kigali's tarmac, it wasn't just ending a flight, it was igniting a contest. The US, Europe, and Asia can no longer speak of leading the future without acknowledging Africa in the same breath. Rwanda has dragged the continent from the sidelines and placed it in the command tower of aviation's next era. The question is no longer whether Africa can keep up. The question now burning in boardrooms and ministries worldwide is this: can the rest of the world keep up with Africa? Let us know in the comments section. Did you ever imagine Africa would set the pace for the future of aviation? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.